today's session. Our speaker today is Lisa Ling from Whole Education. Whole Education are one of GL Assessment's key partners, and we've been working for many years alongside them. I've had the pleasure of working with Lisa for over 3 years now, initially working on the Words for All project in Bolton, and this year on the Words for All project across many local authorities. And it's been great working with you, Lisa. Lisa joined Whole Education in October 2016, and prior to this, she worked in secondary schools for 21 years, first as an English teacher, and then for 13 years as a senior leader and vice principal. Her passion as a teacher and leader has always been to provide an inclusive, engaging, and rounded education for all young people. Whole Education is a network of schools and partners who are united in their belief that all children and young people deserve a fully rounded education. They want more than just great exam results for students and pupils. They want to develop their knowledge, skills, and qualities, which will help them to thrive in life, learning, and work. So this morning, Lisa's going to be talking about the Words for All programme, which was originally designed by Bolton Learning Partnership and Whole Education. The programme focuses on how to help develop expertise from within schools to deliver high quality, effective vocabulary and reading enrichment approaches to improve language skills and academic outcomes. I'm sure that everyone will take some valuable information away from Lisa's sessions today. So without further ado, Lisa, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, and thank you ever so much for that introduction, Darren. And also, I do want to call out your modesty. It was co-created by Whole Education, Words for All, and also GL Assessment, and we wouldn't be able to have the programme if it wasn't for GL's input and the new group reading test, which I'll come into as I go through the presentation. I'd like to say hello to everybody who's taken the time out today to join. I know the busyness of schools at the moment is going to be quite prohibitive for most people, so thank you for putting this time aside to listen to the Words for All presentation. Can I also say that I'm happy to answer any questions, as Darren has said, that are put in the Q&A, but you can also find out more information if you go to the wholeeducation.org website. So Darren's already mentioned about the organisation that I work for. We are a national non-for-profit. We're first and foremost a network, and we're a network that shares the vision of all young people being able not just to survive but to thrive, not only in their schooling but also their future selves. And we do this by working with leaders at all levels. So we work with head teachers, we work with senior leaders, we work with middle leaders to help them to provide that very full-rounded and best education for all young people. As Darren's also already mentioned, we're 11 years old as an organisation, and these have been our three principles, our three guiding principles, right back from 2010, when, if you remember, there was the sort of significant narrowing of the curriculum, and Whole Education was born out of that in order to provide a network where people could share how they bring to life a fully rounded education for their young people. So we are very much about the both ands, and these all actually link to the Words for All programme. So we are about developing both the academic excellence, the knowledge, alongside the skills and qualities of the young person. We do believe that young people are the centre of their education, and a lot of our network schools do a lot of work on students' ownership and agency, as well as teacher ownership and agency, and you'll see that again through the Words for All programme and the core design. And also, I do want to say that various learning environments has always been one of our principles. That's not new for 2020, and we've long felt that it takes a whole community to educate a young person, and that there are a variety of structures and architecture, including online learning, that we can use to get the very best from and for young people. So without further ado, I'm boldly putting some agenda ticks there. I just want to go through what I hope you'll hear in this session. So I hope that from the Words for All project, you'll find out more about the design, so how this project enables you and your teams and your schools to add capacity to what we know is a key priority for all secondaries at the moment in vocab and reading and improving the literacy of young people. We'll look at what are the core elements of the programme, what process triads will go through as they take part in the programme, what the timeline looks like, and what impact we've had so far. So this programme has been running now for 3 years from its co-creation 3 years ago, and we're currently part of a national programme working with 16 local authorities and over 60 schools with a particular group of young people who have been known or are part of the social care system. So I'll just give you a moment to read what is on the screen. This presentation is not going to be about the problem that there is and the gap that exists in vocab and reading for young people. It's going to be about the project and how the project can support driving up outcomes, especially for those that are more disadvantaged or those that are further behind with their vocab and with their reading, but not exclusively for that group of students. It very much is a school-led project. But I think we'd all agree that more than ever, language development and literacy has always been school priorities. They've always been there. As Darren said, I come from an English background, and I have had the role of overseeing literacy across the curriculum in several secondary settings. So it's not a new problem. It's not a problem that's going to go away quickly, if ever. So therefore, we need to have a systematic approach to solving it, a systematic, sustainable, long-term approach. And that's what Words for All is. It's also important that it's very collaborative. So we do work with individual schools, but we also encourage a peer-to-peer support network. We like to see it as a language acquisition movement, so that we have the responsibility to each other to help and to support, to replicate and scale the work that you're doing. And we do see this as being not bolt-on, not additional, not extra, not another thing for schools to work on and to have alongside all of the other priorities. We see this as a way to actually embed and change the culture for one of the priorities that you have as a whole school. So having said that this is not about what the problem is, I think it was important that we all acknowledge that there are lots of statistics out there, there are lots of studies out there that show that this is a project. Obviously, we work very closely with GL Assessment and are very, we're delighted to be part of this festival, and also the fact that this festival is highlighting something that we all need to have as a key priority. This, of course, from yourselves, from GL, that a quarter of all students of 15 have a reading age of 12 or below. Now, we just really need to think about, well, what does that mean? That means that obviously a lot of what they need to access, their day-to-day work in school, is not accessible to them. They can't do the standard of work that we are expecting as teachers. So this is every teacher's priority. This is every teacher's concern. This is every teacher's role to sort of support and to upskill themselves in how they can do that, and the very best approaches they can use. I could have used other statistics. We know that the National Literacy Trust in 2019 reported that as many as 380,000 children aged between 8 and 16 do not own a book. Just take a moment for that to sink in. I know you'll have read that data if you're interested, obviously, in this area. And we know how important reading is and the link of reading and good literacy between all GCSE outcomes. So we know that it's vitally important. Some post-pandemic, I know we're not quite post-pandemic yet, but some concerns that we may have following on from the year that we've just had. There's reports that in Key Stage 2, I think these come from GL as well, that young people are as many 7 months behind in their reading, and that in fact Year 7s are looking to be about 22 months behind in their writing. I read a study in recent weeks. And what other issues are we going to be looking at that we're going to need to be resolved as part of this post-pandemic world? Are we going to be prioritising language development? Is it going to be in its round? Is it going to be looking at vocab development? Are you going to be concentrating on talk routines and turn taking? I credit Alex Quigley for this list. Reading fluency, reading comprehension, And in all of these issues, the Words for All project is there to really help add capacity and build capacity in your school to tackle these and to embed impactful solutions and sort of focus on these key priorities. So on to the project itself now, to begin at the beginning, as it were. So alongside GL and the Bolton Learning Partnership, it was actually 4 years ago, the Bolton Learning Partnership approached Whole Education. We have a relationship of working with them and their 28 secondary schools. They were very concerned about the literacy underperformance for white British boys. So that was and especially high prior attaining white British boys. And they were noticing that already, and bear in mind this was 4 years ago, the change in the high stake exam system was going to severely disadvantage these young people from getting the outcomes that they were capable of and the outcomes that they deserved. So they wanted to put something in place that was going to have an immediate but also a long-term culture change and impact in their schools. They also realised that there was lots of capacity and capability within their schools already. So they didn't want to have one of these sort of cookie cutter programs that came in and said, if you do this, you know, everything will be solved. They wanted to make sure that it was being built from the ground up, from the expertise that they had in Bolton. They also wanted schools to start supporting other schools. They've got a tagline, as you can see there, of ambitious collaboration. So they wanted a project that was going to focus on improving the outcomes and the literacy for these white British boys, but that was also going to be part of that ambitious collaboration, schools working together. So not only educating the young people in front of you in your own school, but also having the responsibility and the care to educate all Bolton students. So they also have another strapline for the 19K, so that the 28 schools come together to have better education for all students across Bolton. And they also wanted some platform where there was peer sharing, explicit peer sharing that could actually lead to best and next practice. So how can you replicate and scale? So that's why the project, or that's how the project came about. So working alongside Bolton and alongside GL, we came up with this design for the project. It's really important that anybody joining the Words for All project, we work with you to make sure that what you're doing is context and cohort specific. So what's the very best interventions and approaches for you to do in your school that will have impact for your young people and that can be replicated and scaled and therefore have sustainable impact. This is not a one size fits all, although there's lots of common projects taking place, although there's lots of broad areas that schools are all joining together and sharing their learning in. This is about what's best for you and for your students. And it could be a project that you're already working on that you want to take a deep dive into to see exactly what's working, what's not working, and therefore what's the very best way to actually increase that impact of that project across the school. Or it could be something new, something that you want to develop and that you want to become part of the culture and part of the DNA of your school. And that context and cohort specific also looks at you can do anything but not everything. Sometimes literacy is massively daunting because it's words. You know, where in the curriculum are you not having to engage and to look at words, and the very nature and name of the project, Words for All, can be quite daunting. You know, we want to do everything. We want to build the vocab, build the reading, build the oracy, build the writing capacity of the young people. But this change management project actually helps you to narrow down we'll look at one thing, we'll look at doing one thing brilliantly, and actually with that, all of the other things sort of fit in. So you actually have a far greater impact across a range of literacy capabilities than you would do if you were doing a more scattergun, sort of light touch, surface level approach. We also, very importantly, want to build on what is good. The very best projects actually don't come in and say, well, you know, we're starting, as I said, from that blank page. So there's lots of expertise that already exists. There's lots of strategies that people have used that perhaps they no longer use or they currently use, but they haven't got as deep an understanding of that strategy as you or your colleagues would like. So this comes at a point of, you know, where are you starting from? Where's your ABC? And then how do you take your work to the next level? It also is explicit about making sure that there is peer learning and support. Sometimes we don't have the time in our busy schedules to share our learning, but what we found in the 3 years of doing this project, that the peer learning is one of the most valued parts of what we do, and that actually coming together for those 3 hours every term, the benefits far outweigh the time commitment. So in those 3 hours, you actually have weeks of sort of high quality learning and high quality CPDL. We also look at evaluation, again, in the busyness of schools. Sometimes that real deep dive evaluation, why did it work? Why, the sort of Simon Sinek stuff. And then making sure that we are scaling up the right things and that we are scaling for success. And of course, NGRT, I've put NGRT on one. NGRT obviously really facilitates that as well. But not only NGRT, a lot of our schools who are planning on joining the Words For project next year are thinking about how they can use PASS as well to really get a good knowledge of where their students start, so benchmarking and then looking at how successful an approach or an intervention is. And also CAT4, so several of the local authorities as well are looking at those 3 GL projects alongside this Words For All work in order to make sure that they've got a really strong evidence base. And I'll show you how NGRT has supported that evaluation later on in the presentation. And this is very important for us. This is not a quick fix, and we've entitled it Beyond Simple Solutions. We need this to be sustainable. And whilst we have an input in year 1, year 2, you know, that the plan is always that the triad in the school become the experts. They then can cascade that out throughout their own school. They can then cascade that out through other schools in the community, and it becomes a network of language acquisition experts and change management experts, so that we add the capacity at the start, but then that decreases as the years go on, and it just becomes a really successful part of how the school exists and what the school does. It's no longer, you know, it's not even thought about, it's just part, as I said before, of the school DNA. So what is the project? So there are 3 core elements to the project. We started off with 2 now. I deliberately or subconsciously, you can decide for yourselves, have them all as 1 because they are equal. This is not a list that's got any sort of hierarchy or order. I will share with you, it's just an error, but possibly one of those fortuitous ones. So, of course, most people, when they're thinking about joining a project or a language acquisition piece of work, just think of the first one there, that what are you going to get from it? Well, as part of this project, you will get immersion in the very best research out there on how you improve young people's vocab and you improve young people's reading. So what is the latest research? What are the latest theories? We have some fantastic advocates and people who take part in this project from a schools base as well. So we have people like Bernie Kay, who's worked on the Blackpool project with GL. She's added to our sort of research and our expertise. Alex Quigley is one of our experts who works alongside us on this project. Mary Myatt, David Dido, Helen Prince, obviously all of the GL team and all of the GL findings add to that research base. So you do have access to the very latest and the very best research in what's happening in vocab and reading improvements and interventions. Very importantly, as part of the pilot year, the co-creation year, we were understanding better that part of the problem and part of the reason why the cohort in Bolton were not having as rapid improvements as we would like in vocab and reading, was that there was actually a lot of social and emotional barriers. So a lot of things needed to be overcome with self-confidence, self-belief, self-worth. And this afternoon, we're joined by Paul Hodgkinson and Tim Brighouse in the Words for All community, looking very much at those social and emotional barriers. We also work with Mary Claire Travis on, making sure that those relationships with the cohorts are there, that you understand why those young people aren't taking on and absorbing and improving in their vocab and reading as quickly as you would like. We also found that there was a lot tied in with identity. And in fact, the boys in the first project didn't necessarily want to improve their vocab because their dialect, their language was tied up in who they were, their communities, their social settings. And so we've learned quite a lot from the EAL community on a lot of the identity that's tied up with language acquisition. And then equally importantly, the third aspect, if you like, of the three core elements is there's no, most things fail on implementation, not on how, good the plan is. So we work with triad teams, not only to plan a really successful intervention and approach that you can measure, so you benchmark and then you can evaluate, but actually then how to implement and sustain that change, so how to replicate it and scale it from year to year to year, and how to keep that momentum and change the culture. So a lot of our participants are doing other qualifications like MPQ H, MPQ SL, MPQ ML, and that they're using this project to further develop their change management skills. And we do think that the project and the school project plan could lend itself to other key priorities in the school. So I think you're developing yourself and your own leadership as well as part of the project. So here is the process. It's a 5-step design. This is the school project plan. As we said, we start with your ambition, and there's a time spent. So there's 3 parts of the early phase. You attend a project launch with some key speakers to inspire you and the work going forward. You have time with a mentor, sort of working on your own individual context and your own individual cohort. You have time with GL, looking at what your NGRT data says, and therefore making sure that you've got a specific group that you're working with who will give you the knowledge that you need to take and to cascade this learning across the school. We write a proposal with you. So you're meeting the actual needs of those young people. It's not just, on a gut instinct or on a whim, or again, as we said, this sort of cookie cutter type, do this and everything will be solved. So we do a proposal. We also help you with the logistics of that proposal. So how you can get the very best out of it and implement it, successfully. In the spring term, you implement your approaches, your interventions, and there's an implementation diary, again, to make sure that you're according that metacognitive process that you and the triad go through, so that when you're looking at how you can replicate and scale that maybe to another department, maybe to another cohort of students, you understand, that the process that you went through. And then very importantly, we join you in your school for a day to help you to evaluate where you've come in that year, but also where you're going to next. So this is what the year looks like. We try to keep with the rhythm of the school. So if you're an individual school, then you join the virtual network, the national network. If you are a group of schools, either a trust or an LA, then it's a hybrid model. So part of it is virtual, part of it is face-to-face. And we think it's really important to embrace what we've learned about the value of technology over the last year, but also equally important to look at what we've missed about not being able to be face-to-face and that peer support and that peer learning. So obviously I've mentioned that NGRT is a very important part of the project. It allows us to be really context and cohort specific. We want to make sure that our triads understand how to really fully use the NGRT. So if you're coming at this from a point of view of an NGRT user, how can you maximize the use of the NGRT tool and test and the wealth of data that it gives us, not just sort of an end score. So it's really important. But as I've said, there's also an opportunity, in several of our LAs next year are speaking to us about, you know, the possibility of using the pupil attitudes to self and study, and also CAT4 as part to enrich the programme, to enrich the data, and therefore to enrich the evaluation as well. So this was from the pilot, and you can see a lot of these are using the NGRT as a measure. They all used it and then obviously had it as an evaluation. There is a video available if you request it, where 2 of these pilot schools speak about the sustained improvement over the last 3 years and how they've gone about it. So that might be really valuable for people to want to actually hear from the schools themselves about why this project has been so successful. But I'll give you a moment to absorb the pilot impact. It's quite incredible. Increased reading ages from one school from between 3 months and 3 years. They do a 6-week withdrawal intervention, which might not be for everybody, but they take the young people out of most lessons and concentrate solely on improving their reading and their reading fluency. And actually, even though they're withdrawn from lessons for that period of time, they come back in either at their reading, their chronological reading age, or above their chronological reading age, and therefore access the lessons 100%, whereas before they've been accessing 5 to 10% of the lesson at best. So whilst it looks like it's a 6 week out, it actually allows them to come back in and you know, make up that time in, you know, in a blink of an eye. The next one was with year 9, and they looked at reading fluency, and you can see that students improved at least 15 words per minute, with some of them in the year 9 tutor groups improving 62 words per minute. And also there were far fewer errors when reading. I don't need to obviously tell the people on this call about all of the research into reading fluency and how that affects young people being able to access or be successful with outcomes. The next one was GCSE. It was year 11. It was boys PE attainment, and they did a vocab piece of work. They also did a lot on the social and emotional aspects and the self-confidence of the young men involved in there, and at least +1 in their progress 8 scores, with 1 or 2 of the students going at least +3, and they were the most disadvantaged. So quite, you know, impressive outcomes, and congratulations to all of these schools for their successful work. And they are ongoing. So all of these 4 schools are now in year 3, they're going into year 4, and they've cascaded to a further 12 schools in Bolton. So it went from 4 schools to 16 schools. And these teachers actually mentor 3 of the other schools. Interestingly, the final one was that this school didn't work with a cohort of students, it worked with a cohort of science teachers, and they actually worked with the science teachers on how you actually teach vocab successfully. And it had a huge impact on the science teachers. They then went over and it was the humanities teachers in year 2 that they worked with. And it was this notion of not every adult is omni-capable in teaching vocab and reading aloud, etc. And I think that that's one of our findings of it. It can be a project that works on really high quality CPDL and upskilling teachers, as much as sort of them having, you know, a student only focus. So I'll give you a moment to scan over these. I think the PowerPoint is available, but these are specifically looking at NGRT, because I know a lot of people on here will be interested in that. But, you know, NGRT has been instrumental in looking at the specific needs, the fact that it can be used with school governors and school leaders and parents to actually show that it's making a difference. You know, we talked about evaluation before, and so often we don't know why or how something's succeeding, and that's allowed that hard data from the final. I think meeting the needs of all students has been really important for us as well. Sorry, yeah, extra moment there. So I'm aware of time. I'm just looking at the clock there. I've already mentioned that we have lots of advocates. There's some here. I know that you'll have heard from people like Alex, David and Mary as part of this and other GL work, but also Bernie was introduced to us. I would urge you to obviously listen to any of the recordings that Bernie has done via the GL work. We also work with OUP. Helen Prince has been one of our links there, and sort of OUP in the Word Gap. Again, there's lots of resources that are available there. And as I said, we're joined by Tim tonight. I couldn't not have that picture because it's just so magical. And Tim not only looking on change management, but also looking on reading and the power of making sure that the most disadvantaged have good access to language acquisition, explicit language acquisition improvement approaches and teaching. So the Words for All project this year, you've seen where the pilot went. We are working, as I said, with 16 local authorities and over 60 schools, whilst each project is individual to that school and they're working with their own specific cohort and meeting the needs of their own specific students and teachers. There are 4 categories that all of the projects fall into. A lot of the schools have been interested in reading out loud and the impact that that can have. We've looked at the sort of faster reading research that was done with Year 8 students, but there's lots of current research into the impact of reading aloud. I think one of the things that we have, or we're looking forward to sharing when the projects come to an end at the end of the summer term, is how you actually work with teachers to enable them to become better at reading aloud to students. And we're also really excited about the new group reading test results, because it suggests that by reading aloud to students, they are going to actually improve and increase their own reading ages. So we shall wait and see, but the signs are very good at the moment. We've worked with a lot of schools about how they're going to actually implement this. So given the year that we've just had, it's not run as a normal year in the project would, but some schools are doing it via Zoom, so via virtual reading aloud. Some schools are doing it in tutor time, some schools are doing it after school, some schools are even having drop down days where they read a book in a day. So we'll be interested to see if that works. As I said, we're just going on to we had David Dido present a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the current 20-minute a day reading aloud to students, and sort of the research that tells us that has a huge impact. So we will be looking to do some more work on that next year with schools, especially that sort of 20-minute drip feed reading aloud and how you can do it. The other project that has had massive popularity in the project this year is academic vocab building, so pre and parallel teaching. So a lot of schools are using science, maths, geography and history, and they're actually taking 10 words a week, usually the tier 2 words rather than the tier 3 subject specific words that young people are going to come across in that area that week. And they're looking for 3 things really. They're looking to see if that increases young people's enthusiasm for the lessons, so by the fact that they've gone and been sort of you know, they've had some quality time with words for that week, whether or not they're therefore more engaged in the lessons, they take a greater part in the lessons, the outcomes are better in the lessons. They're also going to look at young people's confidence. So do they feel by having the 10 words that they're more confident in the lessons, but they're also more confident to understand a greater range of vocabulary when they've been doing things like etymology or morphology or things like that, those strategies, if they can use them themselves to code other words. And then actually, what are the best methods for teaching vocab in their school, in their setting with their students, because there are a range of methods that you can use. So they're trying to experiment with different methods of teaching vocab and actually seeing which ones fit the teachers in their school and the young people in their schools best. Academic non-fiction, so very high quality academic non-fiction. It speaks for itself, but I'll give you an example of one. English department doing Jekyll and Hyde, so therefore they're sort of pre and parallel teaching some really interesting texts about the Gothic, about medicine at the turn of the century, about views to mental health and well-being, about looking at advancement, which of course is another area that you possibly wouldn't necessarily cover in depth while doing Jekyll and Hyde, but it's all of those sort of cultural capital that young people wouldn't have, but doing that through really academic texts and high quality non-fiction academic texts. Another school is using university students in geography. So they've got the theme that they're doing in geography for the term, and they've worked alongside some university level students, bringing university grade text into the classroom, if you like, and sort of pre-teaching and parallel teaching supplementary and complementary university text to support the geography learning, again to build the self-confidence, the self-worth, the engagement, the enthusiasm, but also to develop those sort of vocab and reading skills. And then finally, talk about learning. That's something that's not as developed in this project this year, but we think that sort of going forward, student talk and access to student talk and using talk as a means, you know, talk for reading, talk for writing, is going to become a more significant and a more popular choice for projects in 21-22. So here's just some points about, here's some sort of testimonies, if you like, from people who are taking part in the project currently, and also about sort of, you know, the aspects that one person from the co-creation team, the different aspects of their practice and their students' outcomes that have been improved by doing this project. And then finally for me, I'm just looking at the time. Yes, I think we're good on time. I understand that as I said before, you know, literacy and improving literacy in its very nature is saying you're trying to improve almost everything all at once. So David Crossley, who again co-created this project on behalf of Whole Education, but also is an expert in sustainable change management, has a saying which he uses quite regularly as part of the programme, is you can do anything but not everything. And so we think that the Words for All project allows you to really concentrate on something, to do it really well, to understand why it succeeded or why it didn't, and therefore looking at what you're going to do differently or how you're going to replicate and scale it in the future. And we also think that this is a commitment to do this again and again and again, because this problem isn't going away. It is complex, it's ongoing. We need it possibly now to be reinvigorated more than ever because of 2020, but it was there before the pandemic, and it will certainly be there post the pandemic. But having said that, whilst it's difficult, challenging and complex, it certainly isn't impossible, and it's not inevitable that young people can't improve their vocab, their reading, their language acquisition, and therefore their outcomes. And together, collectively and collaboratively, we can do it. So my favourite quote in the entire world: sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. So together, as a Words for All movement, we can do the impossible. We can make sure that all young people have the highest quality language acquisition and therefore have the very best futures to thrive in life, learning and work. So thank you very much. Over to you, Darren.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Lisa. Really good to hear so many examples of what schools are doing in terms of intervention. You know, just picking up on some of the points you made about the programme. I mean, we know that schools are doing good things, but building on what they're already doing and helping to enable that across the whole school, you know, from your help, enabling that culture change, which then turns it into a long-term strategy. It's we've already started to see some real credible facts and figures that you demonstrated there on how that's worked. So thanks so much for that presentation. We've got lots of customers who use NGRT, and sometimes they just need a bit of help with that next step to turn that data into improving people's lives. So thank you very much indeed. I'm just looking through to see, we haven't got any questions yet, but if anyone has any questions for Lisa, if you can just put those into the Q&A session down at the bottom. Just while I wait for some questions to come through, if anyone wants to do any follow-up conversations regarding this session, we have our Hoover platform where we have discussion forums. Please feel free to go into there after the session if you want to continue the discussion. And we will have a recording of Lisa's session as well. So if any colleagues have missed this, they'll be able to go in a couple of days and access that recording. We do have a session this afternoon for anyone that's got the time and would be interested. We've got Lucy Strange, who's a children's author, and she'll be talking about how to embed a reading culture into the classroom. She's been a secondary English teacher previously. So that session is at 2 o'clock if anyone wants to register for that this afternoon. So there are a couple of questions here, Lisa. One of them's here: how easy is it to change the culture in a school? And what have you seen as the best approaches to this?
Well, I'd start off by saying I don't think it is easy, and I think if it was easy, then there wouldn't be the need for this sort of type of program to help add the capacity to schools and for the busyness of schools. I think what we've seen from Words for All and sort of the general work of whole education, it's about prioritising. Certainly in the Words for All, it's about having that priority. It's about that you can do anything but not everything, and then not obviously sort of trying that sort of scattergun approach. I think it's about starting small and sort of getting bigger. I think it's about having advocates and getting advocates in the school, so a really strong triad. And again, in the Words for All context, it's sort of looking at people who really want to do it, who are really passionate about doing it. Sometimes literacy strategies say take your literacy lead from somebody perhaps who doesn't have that knowledge or doesn't have that background, because it just takes it away from the English department. We found in Words for All that actually it's the English department who are leading it, and we've celebrated that, and we've actually worked, you know, very positively with that. So taking expertise and building it out. I think it's about the sustainability as well. One of our schools that is building a reading culture, they've been working on that for years before Words for All. They use Words for All as a point to really stop and delve deeper into some of the work that they've been doing. But then actually, you know, it was about, I think Claire, the leader in that school, would say that it was about, you know, keeping going, not stopping when things don't perhaps go as well as you thought, regrouping, making sure you're cohort specific, making sure it's very visible, making sure that there's a common language for it. So, you know, I think it's all of those things, but certainly I hope that Words for All supports and builds capacity in schools to start that culture change journey.
Okay. Have you seen any examples of how the program's helped to engage with parents at all with reading?
No, and sort of what in short, we're really looking forward to some of the outcomes from this particular work, because I think it's 3 of our schools, so it's only a very small number, but they've actually used the reading aloud to actually try and support parents and carers in actually how they can improve their reading aloud. And we're also really interested in the part of the NGRT that's got some suggested approaches and interventions, and how actually we can use that with parents as well. We have been approached about whether or not there is an aspect of virtual work that we can do with parents, particularly again on the reading aloud work, because it's been shown that certainly when a young person hits 11 plus, parents are less likely to see that as an intervention or work that they want to do. And then finally, we've also been part of the project with Slough, who are looking at young people reading subtitles on films, and to watch 1 thing a week or 2 things a week where you're forced to watch the subtitles and the impact that has. So watch this space. We will have some data, but it's not yet evaluated.
Brilliant. I've got another question here. How much are you able to influence teachers of subjects other than English? For example, looking at subject-based reading in science or geography?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and that's been a really big part of this year, and also part of the pilot. So in all 4 pilot schools, even though the English triad led it, none of them actually did it in English. They all decided to do it in a different subject. So going back to those bubbles, one school even decided not to focus on a cohort of young people, but focused on the science department, and actually had real frank and open conversations of how good and how knowledgeable was their professional learning on teaching vocab. And in fact, they could really teach their level 3, their tier 3 subject specific vocab, because they understood that and they understood where it's coming from. But range of strategies to teach the etymology of sort of tier 2 words was not there. And in fact, as you saw, 96% of those science teachers actually felt they were far better at approaching all of their lessons and all of their language teaching, having upskilled in vocab. And then there was PE there, and there was year 9 form tutors, which were a range of subjects. And geography seems to be massive. Science and geography seem to be massive departments to work with on this at the moment. And I gave a few examples of those.
And then the final question I've got here is just what have been the most popular interventions that have been used? I know you talked quite a lot of detail in some of those. What have been the most popular?
I think reading aloud is by far the most popular now, because it's getting a lot of attention in the research and evidence community, that by being read aloud to, young people therefore become far greater or far more enthusiastic readers themselves. I think there's still quite a lot in its infancy there, so we need to be cautious and we need to be really evidence-based as to what, but it certainly wouldn't do any harm, and that's been the most popular. But I do think the pre-teach vocab as well, because it's manageable. Taking 10 words a week and really understanding those is manageable, and in fact the impact it then has on the young people's confidence and desire to go and look at other words and look at other texts that are related to it is greater.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. That's all the questions we have for you now. If anyone wants to ask any more questions after this session's finished, please feel free to go on the forums and ask away there. Lisa, thank you so much again, as always, for your input today. It's been brilliant. I'd like to thank everyone who's joined the session today. I do hope you found some useful information. Please leave any comments in the forum if you want to get in touch with Lisa to ask her anything directly. And I wish you all well for the rest of the day, and I hope to see some of you on our future sessions over the next week. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks.